The Walter Cronkite School of Journalism and Mass Communication at Arizona State University is a proud supporter of Indian Country Today. Students at Cronkite News and Gaylord College at the University of Oklahoma cover Indigenous communities together. This important work is distributed by more than 100 news organizations. This collaboration provides a much-needed boost to coverage of Native American communities nationwide. Learn more at cronkitenews.azpbs.org.
This is Indian Country Today.
Esquili, yes, thank you for joining us. I'm Patty Thalahungva. New Zealand Prime Minister Jacinda Ardern is formally apologizing to Pacific Islanders for the infamous mid-1970s dawn raids. An emotional ceremony took place at Auckland's Town Hall. Ardern made the apology on behalf of the nation for the racially charged part of the country's history. The raids often took place very early in the morning or late at night, as authorities targeted Pacifica people for deportation. During the ceremony, a large white mat was pulled over the New Zealand leader's head, completely covering her. Moments later, they removed it and she was embraced. It's a traditional Samoan ritual where the subject seeks forgiveness by exposing themselves to a kind of public humiliation. Ardern told a tearful crowd of several hundred the government is offering a formal and unreserved apology.
The government expresses its sorrow, remorse and regret that the dawn raids and random police checks occurred and that these actions were ever considered appropriate.
As a gesture of goodwill, the government is funding new education and training scholarships for Pacific communities. Votes are still being counted in Seattle's primary race for mayor, and the two Indigenous candidates are trailing for now. There are 15 candidates, and Colleen Echohawk is in third place with just 8% of the ballots counted so far. Casey Sixkiller is in sixth place. Echohawk is Pawnee, and Sixkiller is Cherokee. So far, a former city council member, Bruce Harrell, is leading the race. Mail-in ballots will be counted today, and the vote tally will be updated. It could take a week for the final count. The top two vote-getters in the primary election will face off in November. A Los Angeles City Council member is working to help light up the Navajo Nation. An estimated 15,000 Navajo families currently live without access to power infrastructure of any kind. The reservation lands cross 3 states, New Mexico, Arizona, and Utah. Since 2019, the Navajo Tribal Utility Authority has partnered with the American Public Power Association in the Light Up Navajo project. To date, it has delivered power to more than 900 families during 2 phases of work. Mitch O'Farrell, who is Wyandot, is the only Native American on the Los Angeles City Council. He's introducing a motion to purchase renewable energy from the Navajo Nation.
I've been an environmentalist my whole life. Climate change is real. It is among us. It is part of everyday life now. We have to transition into 100% renewable energy with a great sense of urgency, not for just people alive and on the planet now, but future generations.
Earlier this month, he led a delegation to the Navajo Nation to discuss the project and other partnership opportunities. The third phase of the project is expected to begin in 2022. A Mississippi riverfront project in Minneapolis is in the planning stages, and organizers say it will share the history of the 4 Dakota tribes in the state. The project will be on land around the Upper St. Anthony Falls Lock and Dam. The city is working with local tribes and urban Indian organizations and the local university to determine the use of space. They say the area could potentially be used as an outdoor classroom to teach the history of the local tribes and their ties to the land. According to the Minnesota Daily, Spirit Island, a sacred site once used by the Dakotas, was turned into a limestone quarry. Later, it was removed to clear a channel for ships. Robert Lilligren, who is Ojibwe, is the president of the Native American Community Development Institute. He has high hopes for the project.
And so this is very different in the desire of the power people to really center the Native voices. And what I see is all kinds of possibilities to establish a better way for addressing the desecration and the harmful impacts of colonization. by centering Native voices.
This is just the start of the planning. The project could take years to complete. Organizers are also considering how the land could be returned to the Dakota tribes. The Indigenous Place Names Project is celebrating Dena'ina artistry at a park in Anchorage, Alaska. The new plaza features artwork by Athabaskan and Paiute artist Melissa Shaganoff. Her metal sculpture circling a post is inspired by the dentalium bead pattern of the firebag. The firebag is the theme for the Indigenous Place Names Project, and it represents strength and survival for the Dena'ina people. Signs featuring phrases in the language that say, "You are walking on Dena'ina land," and "living with the outdoors." Athabaskan artist and linguist Joel Isaac helped shape the themes and phrases for the project. Aaron Leggett, who is Dena'ina, is the president of the native village of Eklutna, and he says this is good for his tribe's visibility.
There's a lot of projects going around Anchorage, increasing land acknowledgements, welcomes, those kinds of things. And so it all just kind of keeps feeding and building and growing so that people know that this is a Dena'ina place and always has been.
The ceremony also featured performances by Alaska Native artists and a short program from Anchorage city officials. And those are the headlines from Indian Country Today. I'm Patty Tholahungva. When we come back, Jeffrey Palmer looks at the state of Native media and a preview of his new work.
And regular contributor to the show, John Tsuda III, joins us to talk about national policy impacting Indian country. Call it the Dream Team, a Kiowa filmmaker with a movie about a Kiowa author and a mostly Kiowa film crew. It premiered a couple of years ago at the Sundance Film Festival. Words from Abe Bear documents the life of N. Scott Momaday, and it was part of the PBS American Master Series. We'll talk to Jeffrey Palmer. Welcome, Jeff.
Hi, how are you doing, Mark?
Great. I want to talk about your new movie, and it's a short, but give us the lay of the land.
Yeah, so the film is called Grave Misgivings. It's actually not a new film. It's a film that I made probably about 7 years ago. But what I did was I posted it on Facebook last week, and it just generated buzz. And I realize now, how social media can be this incredible influential space for getting your work out there and your films out, because Grave Misgivings kind of went into the background for a while and now has kind of had this new life and just got offered a screening at a film festival in Oklahoma, so I'm really excited about it.
Geronimo. Few names in American history are as immediately recognizable. The name has crossed over from its original purpose to identify a living, breathing man and has become like his image, like his grave, in the Apache Indian prisoner of war cemetery in Fort Sill, Oklahoma, a symbol. Toward the end of his life, when Geronimo led the strange existence of a celebrity prisoner of war on Fort Sill, he would sometimes sit on the county courthouse steps in Lawton, and when someone recognized him, would pull out a button from his jacket pocket and sell it to the gullible person, claiming it had fallen from his coat. Of course his pocket was full of such buttons.
Does this change the way you think about how films are distributed now?
Oh, yes. Absolutely. It's just become a game changer, I think, in terms of media and how work is being driven and again distributed where people can see it. And if you're an independent filmmaker like I am, you kind of work a little bit under the radar. So to be able to post things and to get things out there and for people to take that up and for the film to go viral in a way or get to the right people, can breathe new life into a film like this one, or if it's a new film, can set the stage for you for getting into a film festival like Sundance or the work going to other places, because as we know now, there's so many projects that are coming out on big networks and in the movie theaters. And so it's a different era, certainly from when I first began as a filmmaker. And so, yes, it's been a game changer, I think, in that sense. And I haven't even, I'm a Gen Xer, so I haven't even like really realized the effects of social media and how to utilize it probably in the right way. But it certainly has changed so many things for us as Indigenous filmmakers, especially.
We've really seen the growth of that, and I really was struck by it after Idle No More, where people in Australia were connecting to people at Pine Ridge and Canada all at the same time, simultaneously. I want to ask you about the authenticity. You have Kiowa authors about a Kiowa subject and using a Kiowa crew. What does that mean?
It means that we own our own stories. It means that we're able to tell the stories from our perspective, through our lens. So I think this was a major thing when Taika Waititi, said at the Oscars when he won his Oscar, for his film Jojo Rabbit, that Indigenous filmmakers and Indigenous storytellers, are important, and it's important to tell our own stories. That's happening now. The above the line, as we say, in the film industry, is being covered now by Native producers, Native directors, Native writers. The writing room is becoming, filled with Native writers, Native graphic artists, Native talent. And even below the line now, we're seeing that as well. So there's great cinematographers, there's great Native editors. And so the ability to work in a crew that understands an aesthetic and understands and appreciates and has reverence for the subject matter that you are working on, it changes everything. And suddenly the films become something more than just, let's say, a profile of N. Scott Momaday, which, there's lots of non-Native filmmakers that could make that film. But to have a Kiowa boy from Carnegie, Oklahoma, who lived only 5 miles away from where N. Scott Momaday grew up, to make a film about that, it's a game changer, I think. And that was one of the reasons why it got into the Sundance Film Festival in 2019, and also, was a very different film for American Masters on PBS. And so there's so many things happening right now. It's just unbelievable. And it's happening at the highest executive levels, all the way down to the PAs. And that just really allows us to say, we're in charge of our stories now, and these stories are fresh, they're new, and they're so diverse, because the Native experience is diverse in so many ways. And so I'm really excited about everything that's happening right now.
Let me ask a bit more about that Indigenous experience, because on one level, you have a story that will be familiar to viewers in Kiowa country, but on another level to all of Indigenous community, and then on another level to the world that says, wow, this is something we haven't seen before.
Yeah, I think that's something that's driving it, is that when you're able to work in this capacity, you have the ability, then to think about your audiences in different ways. And so there is truly a Kiowa audience for a film like Words from a Bear, or there's truly a Native audience, I think, that relates to this short film Grave Misgivings, which is about, Geronimo's grave at Fort Sill. And a film like Reservation Dogs, that's going to be on FX Hulu, that Sterling Harjo and Taika Waititi are working on, again, opens the door to a broader audience who can then say, wow, I didn't know that Native people, lived in these spaces, or that they had these these particular lives. And so that authenticity, that experience is so important right now in terms of representation, in terms of who we are, and again, about the diverse experience of Native people in America, and how we change America, and how we make differences in America. And so that's what makes that very, very important. Yes.
For so long, there was an era when you never saw yourself in the media, whether it's news media or entertainment. And as that changes, what does that mean for young people?
Wow. Gives us a sense of pride, gives us a sense of power. I think it's empowering. It dispels stereotypes. And again, generates a generation that is going to be able to, be in control of their image, and how that narrative plays out. And that's just incredibly powerful right now. And so I think about all of the young people right now that are coming up, who are going to be filmmakers, who are going to be writers, artists, politicians. And with this toolbox that is happening now for them, it's going to give them a great advantage, I think, in being able to be in charge of how people are looking at them. And as Native people know, we're constantly being sort of examined. Now we are in control of pushing the narrative forward, and talking about ourselves the way that we want to talk about ourselves. And so, yeah, those young people, I think, are going to be so empowered by that.
Well, and on one, about a minute left, but on one hand, you have the big major productions like Reservation Dogs, but on the other hand, you have thousands and thousands of pieces being created on TikTok and other platforms where people are playing and practicing.
Yes, all kinds of, and I had a list of, just filmmakers that I know. But you're absolutely right. It's so important to understand that there's just thousands of people that are working in this capacity with media right now. It's at their fingertips, whether it's on their phone. They're learning how to use new devices. Gaming is becoming a big thing. Podcasts are becoming a big thing. It's just becoming a new era of media, a renaissance of sorts. So if we're talking about Inscott-Momaday, we're talking about a renaissance for Native American literature. Now we're in the renaissance of Native American media, or indigenous media, and it's powerful.
Thank you, Professor Palmer.
Thank you.
When we come back, we'll get a Washington update from John Tsuda. Stay with us. John Tsuda III is a regular contributor to Indian Country Today. He's worked as the staff director for the Senate Indian Affairs Committee, and he's also a former Principal Deputy Assistant Secretary for Indian Affairs. Today, he is a partner with Navigators Global, which is a company that provides political services to several industries, including tribes. John Tsuda joins us today to talk about policy and the impact on Indian country. Welcome, John.
Thanks, Mark. Thanks for having me. I always appreciate our talks.
Well, Washington is still buzzing around trying to figure out how to spend more than $6 billion. Maybe start with that.
Sure. Yep. I think the number at this point is $6.6.5 billion. That's still a lot of money in real dollar terms. And so I know there has been a call from some tribal leaders for Treasury to go back and consult again, and maybe play around with the formula a little bit, so there could be a little more of an equitable allocation. When you look at the first tranche of funding that went out, the vast majority of it went out to just a few tribes because it was based primarily on tribal population. So I think they're looking for a little more nuanced formula to take into account the great variety of situations in Indian country.
Well, and that, I mean, just you think about the government challenges for one that has 1,000 tribal members versus one with 400,000. It's a lot of tension right there.
Right. Yeah, and one thing that to be honest, I thought that Treasury has never really given an adequate consideration to is the size of land mass that tribes are responsible for. And so you have a fair number of tribes who have anywhere from 5, 8 to 15,000 members, but they're on a reservation that may be the equivalent of 4 or 5 state counties or even bigger. And so the responsibility for that territory and their members that live there is a heavy financial burden. And that's not really accounted for, I don't think, in the way Treasury has done the formulas so far.
Well, I can think of a lot of examples of that. Just driving across Crow Nation one day, and you realize how vast that landmass is.
Exactly, yes.
There's also a growing tension between particularly Oklahoma and federal government and the Interior Department over McGirt fallout. It seemed to me there was 2 choices. One was to try to work with tribes and come up with a mechanism that worked, and the other is to continue down the path of litigation. And it looks like the state's opting for that second path.
It is. So, I think you can, in the background are a number of long-term issues arising out of the formation of the state of Oklahoma. It really was something that was forced on the tribes by the federal government after promises had been made that this would remain an Indian territory. And so from the tribal perspective and the long memory that we have, that never has sat well. From the state perspective, Oklahoma is one of those states that has always been suspicious of the federal government. And so, when you have a situation like this, where the state feels like it's the federal government and the tribes, siding against the state, it doesn't often lead to an easy negotiation or an easy discussion on how to divvy these up. And the state of Oklahoma has gone through periods, and I think that's one of those where it's been willing to look at litigation as the primary motive to try to settle these issues, as opposed to simple negotiation.
That seems to be almost a difference in how parts of Republican lawmakers view the world, because you go back to Nixon administration and they really saw tribal governments as local governments, and it wasn't the federal government, it was very, very local. And now you see it as this ally with the federal government, that they're coming to get you, basically.
Yes, these things kind of go in ups and downs in different times. They're viewed differently. Republicans, especially those that have supported tribes, have always looked at them as sort of like local governments, and that they are the closest to the people that are governed and the best in the best position to deliver government services to those people, and that really kind of fits the Republican model of government. But when you get to these really sort of larger issues, about federal agency jurisdiction, as you have in this latest litigation moved by the state over surface mining regulation, that really does pit the state against a federal agency, such as the Office of Surface Mining, so that's a challenge always. There's always a tension between the states and those federal agencies. And then you have the tribes thrown in the middle. And the tribes are really trying to find, I believe, a reasonable outcome coming out of the McGirt case. There's a lot of questions when you step outside of the simple, it's not simple, but when you step outside of the criminal context and the other implications, it's really mind-boggling because it affects so much. And so I wish, for my part, I wish the state would be a little more patient and work with the tribes to find a solution. Litigation rarely resolves these in a way that benefits everybody. It's usually very one-sided. One side wins, one side loses. And when you can negotiate out, an arrangement, you can set up a win-win for everybody. And I would hope that that it would be more looked at in the future by the state.
Not to mention the costs involved. That's not good for any taxpayers. Let me ask you about another divide quickly, and that's the growing one in Alaska, which doesn't have the same Indian country issues, but yet you still have the fissure.
Well, it's an interesting contrast. And so you have in Oklahoma, in that case, you sort of have the federal government and the tribes on one side and the state on the other. And in Alaska, interestingly enough, you sort of have the state and the Alaska Native folks on one side and the federal government on the other side. So it's interesting how these play out. But that development of the resources, especially on the North Slope, is a tremendous benefit to the Alaska Native villages up there and the folks up there. They're a huge portion of the population is Native, and so not only is there the employment side of it, but the governmental revenue side that goes to their villages is immense. And so then there's also the shareholders of the Alaska Native corporations that share in those benefits. So it's interesting that the federal government would want to take another look at that.
John Chisuda, thank you so much.
Thanks, Mark.
And that's a slice of our Indigenous world. Thank you for watching. For all the latest news, go to IndianCountryToday.com. I'm Mark Trahant.
Sometimes you got to take a stand just because you know you can. Oh, you got to run, you got to run. This is Indian Country Today.